Hello. Why are we talking about anthologies today? We're talking about anthologies today because I have just launched the crowdfunding page for my anthology. I've been working on it for a while. It's called Moonlight. It's an anthology of queer LGBT werewolves. If that sounds like something you're interested in, click the link above or the link below in the description. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but I've been working really hard on it, and I'm really proud of all of the art and writing in there. So yeah, check it out. So this video, I'm going to actually talk about anthologies, because I was like, dang, if I'm running one of these, I'm sure a lot of people are interested in it. It's comics related. We Gucci, right? So I got a whole bunch of questions on the Discord about anthologies, and I thought I'd go through them. I'm not going to go through them in order because my very last question was, what is an anthology? And I think that's the most important one to address right off the bat. Okay, so an anthology is a collection of stories or of poetry. I think it can be a collection of music too, but for our case, we're going to be talking about collections of stories. And these stories can also be comics. For my anthology, it's a mix of comics and short stories, but that's what an anthology is. It's just a collection. It can be the same author's collection of a whole bunch of different stories around a theme, or there might not even be a theme, or it can be a bunch of different collaborators coming together to write a whole bunch of other stories. And I hope that addresses what an anthology is. All right. So the next big question I got was, how do you find anthologies? And if you're the one running an anthology, how do you find people to join your anthology? I think the former is a lot more difficult than the latter, of course. There aren't super tons of anthologies, especially in the comicking space. There's a handful, like, don't get me wrong, there's lots of things to join, but it's not as constant, and I find it's a lot easier to find collaborators, which some of you might be shocked to hear. When it comes to looking for anthologies to join, keep your eye out on social media. I find Tumblr is actually a really good place to find calls for submission. Weirdly enough, I find that just looking into the calls for submission tag, you can usually find things a lot easier than, like, say, Twitter. Twitter has very bad archivability, so that's one thing to look into. You can find calls for submission on Twitter. Always just be looking for the phrase calls for submission. A lot of the times it's going to be written word short stories, but sometimes it is comic related. Another really good place to look for anthologies, especially in the writings, in the prose writing space, is to look at the Submission Grinder. The Submission Grinder is a very good website for, like, compiling all of these anthologies together. I highly recommend you look into that if you're looking for an anthology. On the other side of it, the far easier side of it, if you want people to know about your anthology, if you have an interesting anthology and a small amount of an audience, you're going to find people interested in submitting to it. Just use the key phrases call for submission, post on Twitter, post on Tumblr, post all over the place, get on the Submission Grinder, look for other calls for submission type websites, and see if people are interested. Make guidelines for what you're looking for, and for the most part, people are going to submit to it. For me, when I'm looking for short stories, I tend to look for completed stories, while with comics, I just have people pitch to me and show their portfolio. It's just a lot easier because a lot of times people don't just have short comics laying around that fit your theme. But yeah, if you don't end up getting a lot of feedback for your anthology, when you're looking for submissions early on, if you can't get a lot of feedback, that's just a good indication that you're going to have a lot of trouble funding if you're looking to crowdfund it later, or you're going to have a lot of difficulty selling it to people. There just might not be that interest, or you might not have the platform ready, in which case just keep at it, keep making comics by yourself, keep having fun, and don't worry about it. Try submitting to other people's anthologies, and there you go. We're all good there. Okay. So the next question I got was, how do you go about choosing a theme? For me, I don't know how it goes for anyone else, but for me, a lot of the times I just have ideas for anthologies that I want to see exist in the world. Like, I love werewolves. Where the heck is my werewolf anthology? Well, there is a few werewolf anthologies. At the very least, there's like, Can I Pet Your Werewolf? Or How to Pet Your Werewolf. I think it's How to Pet Your Werewolf. That one's very cute. I pledged to their reprint of that. But there wasn't a super gay werewolf anthology, and I was like, heck, I want this to exist. Let's see if I can make this exist. When you're choosing a theme, it should be something that excites you, that probably excites other people, and go at it. Just pick a theme. What you'll tend to find is you don't want to be too strict with your theme. You don't want to be too vague either. You just want like a nice, good prompt that's sort of like easy to understand what you're going for. And then you kind of let your submission pool shape the tone and what you're going to get out of it, which kind of moves me to my next question, which is how you go about selecting people for your anthology. So assuming that you've put out a call for submissions and you have a good deadline for when that call for submission ends, and you have a pool of people who have submitted, you're kind of in a position where beggars can't be choosers, okay? You have to deal with what you have received and sort of shape your anthology out of that. I like to go through and find pieces I definitely don't like, and not to say that they're bad, but more they don't fit with something that I'm trying to do. And then I also look for some of my absolute favorite pieces, and then I find pieces that relate well to that one, whether it be in the case of Moonlight, it was after I accepted a few of my absolute favorite ones, I came to a point where I had so many lesbian stories, so many stories about queer women, where I was like, okay, I need to look for more non-binary people, more trans people, more diversity in that aspect, which helped me narrow down my submission pool even more, because I wanted a rounded anthology that didn't just focus on like one aspect of queerness. And so that's how I was able to narrow down like 100, I think it was like 150 submissions. So if you need help with that, enlist a friend to help you, get second opinions. Ursula helped me with some second opinions on the writing things. And yeah, hopefully that will help you narrow down your pool of submissions into a few. And this brings me to my next consideration, which is how long is your anthology going to be? Don't go super huge for your first anthology. Pick like a very small handful of people. For one, you're going to have to pay these people. And yes, you have to pay them unless you're doing like some sort of charity anthology, in which case I guess it's a little more iffy. But you're going to have to pay them, and you're going to want to go for a decent rate. So just do something small. And it'll also decrease your printing cost. Other things to consider are going black and white, again, because that is always going to be cheaper than going full color. And it's going to be a lot less work. So yeah, don't pick super tons of people or super long stories. For me, I did a bunch of 8-page comics and 8 people who did them, and then I did some short story selection. So it's only about 140 pages. So do something small up front and first. Really small anthologies, like really super tiny ones, they can sometimes be in the category of zine, in which case that's perfectly fine to do. Get your feet wet in it before you do anything huge. And that's kind of my advice for like most comicking related things. And it's especially the case when you have other people depending on you and you don't want to mess things up for them. Okay. So don't overwhelm yourself. Just pick a handful of creators and you'll be good. Quality over quantity. Okay. How do you set deadlines and organize collaborators? For deadlines, you're going to want to give people a good chunk of time, okay? So when you're first putting out your call for submission, you want people to have the chance to think and create their story and really develop things out, especially if you're looking for prose submissions, in which case they have to write the story and they want it to be super good for you. So give people at least a month for your call submissions, maybe more. And I guess don't drag it out too much for calls for submission, because everyone who submitted is waiting. And no matter what, everyone's going to submit their piece on the very last day. It's just what they do. It's what you probably do too. Side note, if you want to get into an anthology, some of them are going to read things all at the end, while others are going to be reading submissions as they get them. So try and be early in those cases, because if they see a piece that they absolutely love in their submission pile, they're going to start tailoring things to it and tailoring their next selections to it. So make sure that you give yourself the best chance and try to submit earlier on, when it is not the barrage at the end where everyone is throwing their submission at you very quickly and in a panic. Okay, so there is that. As far as deadlines for actually producing the work, for me, I do pitches, and then I pay like 50% up front for the work, because I kind of commission it, I guess. So for deadlines to create them, I did like a little less than a year to complete 8 pages. You know, people have stuff in their lives, and anthologies aren't going to be the top of their priorities. If people are being paid for it, as they should be, they're more likely to get their work done. But even then, when you're dealing with deadlines, don't make your deadline like the day of launch for like your crowdfunding campaign, be it Kickstarter or Indiegogo or whatever. Make it like a month out or so. Reward people for completing things like ahead of time. Your deadline should give like enough space to like create things. Another thing you want to deal with, I guess, when you're creating like your deadlines, is you want to check in with people. Like, everyone forgets. I forget. I'm that guy. I don't get things done on time unless you poke me. So make sure to like get updates on how things are going. Like, I like to see thumbnails. I like to see the script before it goes through. I like to see the pencils. It just gives you like an idea of what's going on in the anthology to make sure that it's actually being completed. People are lovely. Artists, me included, can be hard with deadlines. Not everyone, but some people can be. So make sure to like just poke people. In this vein of things, talking about how to organize collaborators, they were like, what if I'm shy? Like, how do I do this? For one, I do things over email. I don't like to have people install a program that they don't use, like Discord or Slack. Most people have an email. It's kind of like the prerequisite to get into other things. So I communicate over email. I organize things with spreadsheets to mark down like who's been paid, it's just a list where you just mark off who's been paid, what step in the process are they at, what is their name, what are their pronouns, all that sort of deal. Yeah, you keep all of that organized, and then hopefully you keep on track of everyone, you keep on top of everyone, and everything gets done. The writers... Okay, for Moonlight, I just gotta say, the writers have all been super amazing at getting back to me. The artists can take a little while. I still love them. And the comic writers, they also can take a while to get back to me. And I am the absolute worst in this equation. Like, I am terrible at answering emails. I'd like to say that my excuse is that because I'm dealing with every single person's email and trying to keep on top of them. But let's be real, I'm just really bad at responding to things. I want to make an excuse like, oh, I also have to keep up with Discord and YouTube comments, but I don't. So just be like a little bit organized and you should be okay. Like, if you can be as organized as me, which is base level organized, you should be good. The next question I got was like writing contracts. I'm not a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice on contracts. What I do for contracts, because I don't it's not a lot of money that I'm dealing with. It's really small. Is I think I've done a video on contracts before. You basically write down like when you're gonna pay people, how you're gonna pay them, what rights you get, all of that stuff. Wow, this is super vague. I just looked over some other like literary kind of contracts or comic anthology contracts, and you should be good. Especially if you're doing something really small like a zine. Like, I wouldn't worry about it super tons. Your contract is basically to make sure everyone knows that they are on the same page as you, and you are on the same page as them as far as payment, as far as rights, as far as when this thing is going to be printed, when do they get their rights back, all that kind of stuff. It's not something I'd be great at answering, honestly, but yeah. The last question, I just made this one up, is should I join an anthology? Or should I do an anthology? Okay, for the should you join an anthology, yes, if they pay you. Don't join zines and anthologies that are not going to pay you. If it's a tiny zine, don't take a royalty, unless it's like a royalty that happens after an advance. Because if it's a tiny zine and you're making like $2 royalty for the whole thing, that's not going to be worth it. Okay, make sure that you're getting like a comic standard rate. Make sure they're giving you like some money, like not $5 a page kind of money. And the reason I say that you make sure you're being paid is because you shouldn't be paid in exposure, and a lot of anthologies are going to try and pay you in exposure when in actuality, okay, no shade here. Okay, total shade here. If someone is not paying you for an anthology, they're just bolstering their own brand, okay? They are going to get a Kickstarter under their belt that they can share with people to be like, hey, I ran this and it went great. They can kind of use your audience to gain traction for their very own Kickstarter or whatever it is that they're doing to get their anthology out there. And you deserve money. Like, you really deserve the money for doing all that work, doing all that art, doing all that writing. You deserve it. So don't go with an anthology that's going to just piggyback off of you and not pay you, because that's really silly. Don't do that to yourself, because you could just make your own anthology and pay yourself and your friends, and everything would be 10 out of 10 amazing if you did that. Okay, so join anthologies that you will see money out of. Should you run an anthology? No, you shouldn't, okay? If you're the kind of person who's like whimsically thinking of an anthology, that's really cool. Before you go ahead and make an anthology, make this big project, okay? There's a lot that goes into it. It's like running any other type of campaign that you would with your own art. But it's a lot harder because you also have to organize everything, okay? Like, have some experience under your belt before you do something like this, okay? Don't just jump right into it, because people are counting on you and you don't want to let people down, okay? Don't let people down. Don't break hearts, okay? Okay, that's all I'm saying here with the do not do an anthology thing, is I would love to see more anthologies out there. That'd be super cool. Create them, go ahead. But if you have zero experience, don't, okay? If you don't want to run something, if you don't want to do like a big, super huge comic book project, if you don't want to do a comic book project, that's fine. But maybe do like a small zine with like 3 or 4 friends or something. Like, don't jump into a big old anthology with no experience, because that's a bad idea. And likewise, be sus on people, okay, when you are joining anthologies, because some people running anthologies are those people that have zero experience, okay? So there you go. That is my advice on anthologies. I hope it helps. I hope we Gucci, I don't know why I keep saying Gucci. It's the name of my grandpa's dog. Gucci Gang is just golden retrievers. Okay. Check out Moonlight. Thank you so much for coming to my TED Talk. Goodbye.